My son filed a 3.2 meters lawsuit to bleed me dry, so I walked into his firm with evidence and issued a 24-hour ultimatum that left them stunned. The morning light filtered through my kitchen window as I poured my second cup of coffee, savoring what I thought would be another peaceful Saturday. At 64, I'd learned to appreciate quiet moments like these. The newspaper lay folded beside my breakfast plate, and I was just settling into my favorite chair when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My neighbors knew I kept to myself these days, especially since Martha passed 3 years ago. The sound echoed through my empty house again, more insistent this time. Through the peephole, I saw a young man in a crisp suit, holding an official-looking envelope. Process server, my mind registered immediately. 40 years in construction had taught me to recognize trouble when it came knocking. "David Harrison?" His voice carried that practiced neutrality of someone who delivered bad news for a living. "That's me." "You've been served." The envelope felt heavier than it should have as I closed the door behind me. My name was typed across the front in bold letters, along with words that made my stomach drop. Civil complaint, Superior Court. The return address made everything worse. Peterson, Wells and Associates, the same law firm my son Michael worked for as a junior partner. I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers, and the world shifted beneath my feet. Harrison Construction LLC was being sued for $3.2 million. Breach of contract, negligent construction, property damage. The plaintiff's name at the top of the page hit me like a physical blow. Michael David Harrison. My own son was suing me. The papers scattered across my kitchen table as I sank into my chair, reading and rereading the allegations. According to the lawsuit, the commercial building I'd constructed for Michael's investment group 2 years ago had developed structural issues. Water damage, foundation problems, electrical failures. The kind of problems that would destroy a construction company's reputation overnight. But that wasn't what made my hands shake as I held those documents. It was the date at the bottom of the first page. The lawsuit had been filed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, and not a single phone call from my son. Not a conversation, not a warning, not even the courtesy of a heads up before he tried to destroy everything I'd spent 4 decades building. I pulled out my phone and dialed Michael's number, my finger hovering over the call button for a full minute before I pressed it. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "You've reached Michael Harrison. I'm unavailable right now, but please leave a detailed message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." The beep felt like a gunshot in my quiet kitchen. "Michael, it's your father. I just received some paperwork that I think we need to discuss immediately. Call me back." I set the phone down and stared at the lawsuit again, hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The building in question was the Riverside Commerce Center, a project I'd poured my heart into because it wasn't just another job, it was my son's future. Michael had approached me 2 years ago with stars in his eyes and a business plan that would make him rich. He'd found investors, secured financing, picked the perfect location. All he needed was a contractor he could trust to build his dream at a fair price. Family discount, he'd called it with that charming smile that reminded me so much of his mother. I'd taken the job for $200,000 less than my usual bid because I believed in him, because I wanted to see him succeed, because after Martha died, that project felt like the bridge that might finally bring us closer together. Now that same project was apparently going to destroy me. My phone buzzed against the table. A text message, not from Michael, but from an unknown number. "Heard about the lawsuit. Karma's a real pain, isn't it? J. Jennifer Walsh, Michael's ex-wife. The woman who'd made my son's life miserable for 8 years before their divorce was finalized 6 months ago. I hadn't heard from her since the day she moved out of their house, taking half of everything Michael owned and most of his dignity with her. I deleted the message without responding, but her words lingered like smoke in the air. Karma. What exactly did she think I'd done to deserve this? The rest of Saturday crawled by in a haze of phone calls that went to voicemail and text messages that received no reply. I tried Michael's office, his apartment, even his favorite restaurant where he sometimes grabbed lunch on weekends. Nothing. By Sunday morning, desperation had replaced shock. I drove to his apartment complex, a sleek high-rise downtown that screamed success and sophistication. The kind of place Martha would have been proud to see our son living in. The doorman recognized me from previous visits. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Here to see Michael." "Is he in?" "Haven't seen him this weekend, sir, but you're welcome to call up." I tried the intercom system, pressing Michael's apartment number and waiting for a response that never came. The silence felt deliberate, calculated. My son was avoiding me, and that hurt worse than the lawsuit itself. Driving home through the familiar streets of the town where I'd built half the commercial buildings, I felt like a stranger in my own life. Neighbors waved from their yards as I passed, probably having no idea that the man they'd known for decades was about to become the subject of gossip and speculation. How long before word spread through our small community? How long before clients started canceling contracts and suppliers demanded payment up front? In the construction business, reputation was everything, and lawsuits had a way of poisoning relationships that took years to build. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck for several minutes, staring at the house Martha and I had called home for 37 years. Every board, every nail, every custom detail had been installed by my own hands. It was more than a house. It was proof of what careful craftsmanship could create when someone took pride in their work. Now my own son was claiming that same craftsmanship was defective, dangerous, worthy of a $3 million judgment. My phone rang as I finally climbed out of the truck. Hope flared in my chest until I saw the caller ID. Robert Chen, my attorney and golf partner for the past 15 years. "David, I heard about the lawsuit. We need to talk." "How did you hear about it so fast?" "The legal community's smaller than you think, especially when it involves family drama. Can you come in tomorrow morning? This is serious enough that we shouldn't discuss it over the phone." "How serious?" A pause that lasted too long. "Serious enough that you need to start documenting everything related to that project. Every email, every receipt, every conversation you can remember. And David, don't contact Michael directly. Anything you say to him now could be used against you later." After Robert hung up, I stood in my empty kitchen holding a phone that felt like evidence in my own prosecution. My son had lawyered up and declared war, and apparently I wasn't supposed to even try talking to him about it. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 2 years after Martha's death, I'd tried everything to stay connected with Michael. Weekly dinners that he gradually stopped attending, holiday invitations that were politely declined, phone calls that went unreturned until I finally stopped making them. I told myself he was busy building his career, finding his way after the divorce, dealing with his own grief over losing his mother. I'd made excuses for the growing distance between us because the alternative was admitting that my only child had simply written me off. Now he'd found a way to make contact, through a process server and a lawsuit that could destroy everything I'd worked for. I walked to my home office and pulled out the thick folder labeled Riverside Commerce Center. Every detail of the project was documented inside. Permits, inspections, material receipts, progress photos, change orders. The kind of meticulous record-keeping that had kept Harrison Construction successful for 4 decades. As I spread the documents across my desk, memories of the project flooded back. The pride in Michael's voice when he'd first described his vision, the way his eyes lit up when I'd agreed to take the job. The satisfaction I'd felt watching the building take shape, knowing it would house my son's dreams. I'd been so focused on making him proud that I'd missed the signs. The way he'd started questioning my methods halfway through construction. The tension in our conversations when I'd tried to explain why certain changes would affect the timeline and budget. The gradual shift from collaboration to criticism. By the time the building was finished, our relationship had cooled to polite professionalism. Michael had thanked me at the completion ceremony, but his smile hadn't reached his eyes. I'd assumed it was stress from managing investors and coordinating tenants. I'd never imagined he was already planning to blame me for problems that hadn't even surfaced yet. Now, sitting in my office surrounded by evidence of my own competence, I realized how thoroughly I'd been set up. The lawsuit wasn't just about construction defects. It was about revenge, resentment, and a son who'd found the perfect way to hurt his father while enriching himself in the process. The question was what I was going to do about it. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat across from Robert Chen in his downtown office. The mahogany conference table between us was covered with copies of the lawsuit, building permits, and inspection reports. Robert's usually cheerful demeanor had been replaced by the serious expression he wore in court. David, I've reviewed everything twice. The allegations are serious, but they're also suspiciously vague. He tapped his pen against the legal documents. Water damage from faulty waterproofing. Foundation settling due to inadequate soil preparation. Electrical systems that allegedly don't meet code standards. Every single one of those claims is false, I said, my voice harder than I intended. The building passed every inspection. I have certificates from the city, signed off by 3 different engineers. I believe you, but belief won't win this case. Robert leaned back in his leather chair. The problem is proving these allegations are false will require expensive expert witnesses, detailed inspections, and potentially months of litigation. Michael's firm knows that. The weight of his words settled over me like concrete. You're saying they're counting on me not being able to afford to fight this. It's a common strategy. File a lawsuit with damages high enough to force a settlement, even if the underlying claims are weak. Most small business owners can't afford the legal fees to fight a $3 million lawsuit, even if they'd eventually win. I stared out Robert's window at the city skyline, recognizing at least a dozen buildings I'd helped construct over the decades. Each one stood as testimony to my skill and integrity. None of that seemed to matter now. There's something else, Robert continued, his tone growing more cautious. I made some inquiries about the timing of this lawsuit. Michael's investment group has been struggling financially for the past year. 2 of their major tenants defaulted on their leases, and they're facing foreclosure on the property. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. So they need someone to blame for their financial problems. And a father makes a convenient target, especially one who gave them a family discount on construction costs. Robert's expression was grim. If they can prove the building's problems are due to construction defects rather than market conditions or poor management, their insurance might cover the losses. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Insurance fraud. I'm not saying that's what this is, but the timing is certainly convenient. The lawsuit was filed just 3 days before the foreclosure proceedings were scheduled to begin. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Michael's name appeared on the screen for the first time since I'd received the lawsuit papers. After 3 days of silence, he was finally ready to talk. Answer it, Robert advised, but keep it brief and professional. Don't admit anything or discuss the merits of the case. I pressed the accept button with fingers that weren't quite steady. Hello, Michael. Dad. His voice sounded tired, strained. I heard you've been trying to reach me. I received some paperwork on Saturday that came as quite a shock. I thought we might discuss it like family instead of through lawyers. A long pause filled the line. I could hear office noise in the background, the familiar sounds of a busy law firm. Dad, this isn't personal. It's business. The building has serious problems, and my investors are demanding accountability. Serious problems? My voice rose despite Robert's warning gestures. That building passed every inspection. I have documentation for every material used, every procedure followed. Inspections don't catch everything, and you know it. We've had water damage in 3 different units, foundation cracks in the parking garage, and electrical issues that could have caused a fire. Then why didn't you call me when these problems first appeared? Why didn't you give me a chance to investigate or make repairs before filing a lawsuit? Another pause, longer this time. Because my attorney advised me that contacting you directly could compromise our legal position. Your attorney. I repeated the words with growing anger. Michael, I'm not just some contractor you hired off the street. I'm your father, the man who taught you how to swing a hammer, the man who worked 16-hour days to pay for your law school. And I appreciate everything you've done for me, Dad. I really do. But this is bigger than our relationship. I have investors who trusted me with their money, and I have to protect their interests. Even if it means destroying mine? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When Michael finally spoke, his voice had turned cold and professional. I hope we can resolve this quickly and amicably. My attorney will be in touch with yours to discuss settlement options. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Settlement options. My own son was already planning to extort money from me, rather than investigate whether his claims had any merit. Well, Robert said quietly, that conversation told us everything we need to know. This isn't about construction defects. It's about money, and Michael's willing to sacrifice your relationship to get it. I set my phone down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it against the wall. What are my options? Three choices, really. Fight the lawsuit and risk everything if we lose. Settle out of court for whatever amount they'll accept, or— He paused, studying my face. We could go on the offensive. What do you mean? If Michael's investment group is committing insurance fraud by blaming legitimate financial problems on fabricated construction defects, we might be able to file a countersuit. Malicious prosecution, abuse of process, intentional interference with business relationships. The idea sent a surge of energy through me. After 3 days of feeling like a victim, the possibility of fighting back was intoxicating. What would that accomplish? Best case scenario? We prove the lawsuit is frivolous and recover damages for harm to your business reputation. Worst case? We make this expensive enough for them that they decide to drop the whole thing. I thought about Michael's cold voice on the phone, his casual mention of settlement discussions, the way he'd treated our relationship like a business transaction. Do it. David, I need you to understand what you're committing to. This will get ugly. Family lawsuits always do. By the time this is over, your relationship with Michael may be permanently damaged. I looked out the window again at the skyline I'd helped build, then back at Robert's concerned face. I think it already is. The rest of the week passed in a blur of legal preparation. Robert filed our countersuit on Thursday, alleging that Michael's lawsuit was frivolous and designed to extort settlement money rather than address legitimate construction issues. The local legal community buzzed with gossip about the father-son lawsuit that was turning increasingly bitter. By Friday afternoon, word had reached the construction industry. 3 potential clients called to postpone meetings until the lawsuit was resolved. My material suppliers started demanding cash on delivery instead of extending their usual 30-day terms. The damage to my reputation was already beginning, exactly as Michael had probably anticipated. I was reviewing invoices in my office when my secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Harrison, there's a woman here to see you. Says her name is Jennifer Walsh. Michael's ex-wife stood in my reception area wearing designer jeans and a confident smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked better than she had during the final months of her marriage, when the constant fighting with Michael had left her thin and exhausted. Hello, David. I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. Jennifer, this is unexpected. I'm sure it is. Could we talk privately for a few minutes? I think you might find what I have to say very interesting. I led her into my office and closed the door, wondering what my son's ex-wife could possibly want to discuss. She settled into the chair across from my desk and crossed her legs, studying me with calculating eyes. I heard about the lawsuit, she said without preamble. Michael's trying to destroy you to save his own skin. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, please. Her laugh held no humor. David, I was married to him for 8 years. I know exactly how his mind works. When Michael has a problem, he finds someone else to blame for it, usually someone who cares about him enough not to fight back. I remained silent, unsure where this conversation was heading. The Riverside Commerce Center has been hemorrhaging money since the day it opened. Michael made terrible decisions about tenant selection, charged below-market rents to fill empty spaces, and spent the maintenance budget on personal expenses. By last Christmas, the whole project was underwater. How do you know all this? Because I was still married to him when most of these decisions were made, and because I kept copies of financial documents that I thought might be useful someday. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Someday has arrived. The envelope sat between us like a loaded weapon. Jennifer's manicured fingers drummed against my desk as she waited for me to respond. Part of me wanted to grab those documents immediately, but 40 years in business had taught me that information always came with a price. What exactly are you proposing, Jennifer? Her smile turned predatory. Michael destroyed my life during our divorce proceedings. He used his legal connections to hide assets, manipulated our prenuptial agreement, and left me with a fraction of what I deserved after 8 years of marriage. Now he's trying to do the same thing to you. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But I have documentation that proves the Riverside Commerce Center's problems have nothing to do with construction defects. Bank statements showing Michael diverted funds meant for building maintenance into personal accounts. Email chains discussing how to manipulate tenant agreements. Records of payments to his gambling addiction that he kept hidden from everyone. My stomach clenched. Gambling addiction? Oh, you didn't know. Your son has been frequenting the tribal casino 3 nights a week for the past 2 years. Started small, but by the time I filed for divorce, he was losing $20,000 to $30,000 a month. Where do you think that money was coming from?" The room felt like it was spinning. Every conversation I'd had with Michael over the past year suddenly took on new meaning. His requests for family loans that he'd claimed were for business expansion, his evasiveness about the building's financial performance, his growing distance from family gatherings where questions might be asked. "The building's problems aren't fabricated," Jennifer continued. "There really is water damage and foundation issues. But they're not from construction defects. They're from deferred maintenance because Michael spent the repair budget at poker tables." I stared at the envelope, understanding that whatever was inside would change everything. "What do you want in return for this information? Justice? And maybe a little revenge?" Her eyes hardened. "Michael painted me as a gold digger during our divorce, made me look like a greedy ex-wife trying to steal money I hadn't earned. He destroyed my reputation in this town, cost me friendships, made it impossible for me to find work in my field." She stood and walked to my office window, gazing out at the skyline. "I want him to experience what it feels like to lose everything because of someone else's lies. I want him to understand the consequences of treating people like disposable assets. This could destroy his career, his entire future. The way he destroyed mine." She turned back to face me. "David, I'm not asking you to manufacture evidence or file false claims. I'm offering you proof of what really happened. What you do with that information is entirely up to you." My hands trembled as I reached for the envelope. The weight of it felt substantial, promising. Inside were dozens of documents, bank statements, email printouts, credit card receipts, investment account summaries. A paper trail that painted a devastating picture of financial mismanagement and deliberate fraud. One email chain particularly caught my attention. Messages between Michael and his investment partners discussing the building's mounting problems and their need to find someone to blame before their insurance company investigated too closely. My name appeared throughout the correspondence, not as a family member who deserved honesty, but as a convenient scapegoat whose reputation they were willing to sacrifice. Another document showed wire transfers from the building's maintenance account to Michael's personal checking account, always in amounts just small enough to avoid triggering automatic bank reviews. Thousands of dollars that should have gone toward building upkeep had instead funded his gambling habit. But the most damning evidence was a recorded phone conversation between Michael and one of his law partners, discussing their strategy for the lawsuit against me. Jennifer had apparently recorded it during one of their final marital arguments when Michael had brought work home. "The old man's too proud to settle quickly," Michael's voice crackled through my computer speakers. "But he can't afford to fight a prolonged legal battle. We'll drag this out for 6 months, bleed him dry on legal fees, then offer to settle for half the original amount. He'll take it just to make the nightmare end." His partner's response was equally chilling. "What if he can prove the construction work was up to standard? Doesn't matter. By the time we're done, his reputation will be so damaged that no one will hire Harrison Construction anyway. Win or lose, we accomplish our goal." I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. This wasn't just about money or business problems. This was a calculated campaign to destroy me, orchestrated by my own son with the cold efficiency of a professional assassination. Jennifer watched my face as I processed the implications. "Now you understand what kind of man your son has become. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Why didn't you use this information during your divorce proceedings?" I tried, but Michael's legal team had connections mine didn't. They managed to get most of it excluded as irrelevant to the dissolution of marriage. The gambling addiction was ruled a separate issue from asset division. Her voice turned bitter. "Amazing how the legal system protects its own, isn't it?" I thought about Robert's advice to go on the offensive, about the countersuit we'd filed alleging malicious prosecution. With Jennifer's evidence, we wouldn't just be defending against Michael's claims. We'd be exposing him as a fraud and a thief. "There's something else you should know," Jennifer said, settling back into her chair. "Michael's planning to get married again. Next month, actually. A paralegal from his firm named Rebecca Santos. Sweet girl, probably has no idea what she's getting into." The news hit me like another blow. My son was getting married, and I'd learned about it from his ex-wife during a meeting about his lawsuit against me. How had our relationship deteriorated to this point? He didn't invite you to the wedding, did he? Jennifer's tone carried false sympathy. I'm not surprised. Rebecca's family has money, and Michael's trying to present himself as a successful attorney from a respectable background. A father he's publicly suing for construction defects doesn't fit that narrative. I closed my eyes, remembering the little boy who used to follow me around construction sites, asking endless questions about how buildings were made. The teenager who'd proudly told his friends that his dad built half the town. The young man who'd hugged me at his law school graduation and promised we'd always be close. That person had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of systematic deception, financial fraud, and betraying family bonds for personal gain. The realization hurt worse than any lawsuit could. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Of course, but don't take too long. Jennifer stood and smoothed her jeans. Michael's wedding is in 3 weeks. If you're going to act on this information, timing matters. Nothing would be more satisfying than watching him explain these documents to his new bride and her wealthy family. After she left, I sat alone in my office as darkness fell outside my windows. The manila envelope lay open on my desk like Pandora's box, its contents promising both justice and destruction. I could use this evidence to destroy Michael's lawsuit, expose his fraud, and probably end his legal career. I could make him pay for every lie, every betrayal, every dollar stolen from building maintenance accounts. But doing so would also make our estrangement permanent. Whatever slim hope remained for reconciliation would die the moment I filed these documents in court. I would win the legal battle but lose my son forever. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. Robert's name appeared on the caller ID. David, I just heard something interesting from a colleague at Peterson, Wells & Associates. Apparently Michael's been asking around about settlement discussions. Word is they're getting nervous about our countersuit. Nervous enough to drop their claims? Maybe, but there's a catch. They want to meet next week to discuss terms. Michael specifically requested that you attend personally rather than sending me as your representative. I stared at Jennifer's evidence spread across my desk. He wants to negotiate face to face. Seems that way. The question is whether you're ready for that conversation. From what I understand, it could get emotional. Emotional. That was one way to describe confronting my son with evidence of his fraud and betrayal. Another way would be devastating. Set up the meeting, I said. It's time Michael and I had an honest conversation about what family really means. The Riverside Commerce Center looked different in the harsh light of Monday morning. What had once represented hope and collaboration between father and son now stood as a monument to deception and greed. I parked across the street from the building, studying its facade for signs of the structural problems Michael claimed justified his lawsuit. The exterior appeared solid. No visible cracks in the foundation, no water stains on the walls, no obvious settling issues. Either the building's problems were remarkably well hidden, or they existed primarily in legal documents designed to support insurance fraud. My phone buzzed with a text message from Robert. Meeting confirmed for 2 p.m. at Peterson Wells conference room. Michael will be there with 2 partners. You sure you want to do this alone? I typed back my response. I need to handle this myself. Family business. The law firm's downtown offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower I'd helped construct 15 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me as I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, surrounded by my own craftsmanship while preparing to confront my son's accusations of shoddy work. The reception area was designed to intimidate. Marble floors, mahogany paneling, oil paintings that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. A young woman with perfectly styled hair greeted me with professional courtesy. Mr. Harrison? They're waiting for you in conference room A, right this way. The conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Michael sat at the far end of a polished table, flanked by 2 older men in expensive suits. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across his face before professional composure took over. Dad, thank you for coming. I took the seat directly across from him, placing Jennifer's manila envelope on the table between us. Michael, gentlemen. The older man to Michael's right extended his hand. David, I'm James Peterson, senior partner here at the firm. This is my colleague Richard Wells. We appreciate you taking time to meet with us today. I figured it was time we cleared the air about this lawsuit." Peterson nodded gravely. "That's exactly what we're hoping to accomplish. As you know, litigation can be expensive and time-consuming for everyone involved. We believe there might be room for a mutually beneficial resolution." "What kind of resolution?" Michael leaned forward, his attorney persona fully engaged. "Dad, we recognize that this situation has been difficult for everyone. The last thing any of us wants is a prolonged legal battle that damages relationships and reputations. Interesting concern coming from someone who filed a $3 million lawsuit without bothering to call his father first." "The building has legitimate problems that need to be addressed," Michael replied stiffly. "My investors are facing significant financial losses due to construction defects." I opened the manila envelope and spread Jennifer's documents across the table. Bank statements, emails, credit card receipts, and recorded conversations painted an unmistakable picture of fraud and mismanagement. Michael's face went pale as he recognized what he was looking at. "Construction defects," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call gambling away the building's maintenance budget? Is that what you call diverting funds meant for structural repairs into your personal checking account?" The two senior partners exchanged glances, clearly seeing this evidence for the first time. Peterson picked up one of the bank statements, studying the highlighted transactions with growing alarm. "Michael," Wells said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately before continuing." "No need," I said, standing up. "I think we've said everything that needs saying. Michael, you have 24 hours to withdraw your lawsuit. If you don't, I'll file these documents with the court, the State Bar Association, and your insurance company. I'll also make sure Rebecca Santos and her family understand exactly what kind of man she's planning to marry." Michael's composure finally cracked. "Dad, you don't understand the pressure I've been under. The investors, the gambling debts, the divorce. I needed time to get back on my feet. So you decided to destroy me instead. I thought you'd just settle, take a small hit and move on. I never intended for it to go this far." I gathered up Jennifer's documents, leaving copies on the table for the senior partners to review. "You intended to extort money from your father to cover your gambling debts and financial mismanagement. The fact that it went exactly as far as you planned doesn't make it any less despicable." As I reached the conference room door, Michael called out desperately, "Dad, wait, we can work this out. Family shouldn't fight like this." I turned back to face my son, seeing not the successful attorney he pretended to be, but the scared, desperate man he'd become. "You're right, Michael. Family shouldn't fight like this. But you stopped being family the day you decided I was expendable." The elevator doors closed on the sound of urgent whispered conversations and what might have been my son's voice calling my name. I'd given him a choice: withdraw the lawsuit and face the consequences of his actions privately, or continue fighting and watch his entire life implode publicly. 24 hours would tell me which kind of man my son really was. The drive home felt different than any I'd taken before. Not just because of what had happened in that conference room, but because of what was about to happen next. 24 hours. That's all the time I'd given Michael to make a choice that would determine whether he had any integrity left or if the son I'd raised was truly gone forever. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck for several minutes, staring at the house Martha and I had built together. Every memory of Michael seemed to echo through those walls now, teaching him to use power tools in the garage, helping him with math homework at the kitchen table, celebrating his law school acceptance with champagne we couldn't really afford. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else's life. My phone had been buzzing intermittently during the drive home, but I'd ignored it. Now, parked in my own driveway, I finally looked at the messages. 3 missed calls from Robert, 2 text messages from unknown numbers, and 1 voicemail from a number I recognized as the main line at Peterson, Wells and Associates. I played the voicemail first. "Mr. Harrison, this is James Peterson. I think it would be beneficial for all parties if we could arrange another meeting tomorrow morning. There are some developments regarding your son's case that we need to discuss immediately. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." Developments. The word carried weight I didn't like. I dialed Robert's number instead. "David, thank God you called back. What the hell happened in that meeting today?" I showed them the truth about Michael's lawsuit. "What kind of developments is Peterson talking about?" That's what I've been trying to reach you about. Word is spreading through the legal community that Michael's case might be falling apart, but there's also talk about criminal investigations. David, if those documents you showed them prove financial fraud, this could go way beyond a civil lawsuit. The implications hit me like cold water. I'd been so focused on defending myself and exposing Michael's lies that I hadn't fully considered the criminal aspects of what Jennifer had uncovered. Diverting building maintenance funds for personal use wasn't just civil fraud. It was theft, embezzlement, the kind of charges that ended legal careers and sent people to prison. How serious could this get? Replay. If the district attorney decides to investigate, Michael could be looking at felony charges. And David, there's something else. I just got off the phone with an investigator from the State Insurance Commission. Apparently someone tipped them off about potential insurance fraud related to the Riverside Commerce Center. Someone tipped them off? They wouldn't say who, but the timing suggests it was someone who knew about today's meeting. The investigator wants to interview you about the construction work and any knowledge you might have regarding the building's actual condition versus the insurance claims being filed. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of unintended consequences. I'd wanted to expose Michael's lies and protect my own reputation. I hadn't meant to trigger a criminal investigation that could destroy his entire future. Robert, what have I done? You've told the truth. That's never the wrong choice, even when the consequences are painful. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, debating whether to call Michael directly. Despite everything he'd done, he was still my son. Shouldn't I warn him about what was coming? Give him a chance to come clean before investigators started knocking on doors? But then I remembered his voice in that recorded conversation, discussing how to bleed me dry with legal fees. The casual way he'd planned to destroy my reputation while enriching himself. The fact that he was planning a wedding I hadn't even been told about, let alone invited to. My son had made his choices. Now he'd have to live with the consequences. The next morning brought unseasonably warm weather for October, the kind of day that made you want to work outside instead of dealing with lawyers and lawsuits. I was trimming hedges in my backyard when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the fence, I could see a familiar figure walking toward my front door. Michael looked like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his expensive suit jacket draped over his arm instead of being worn properly. This wasn't the confident attorney who'd sat across from me in that conference room. This was a man who'd spent the night realizing how completely his world was about to collapse. I set down my hedge trimmers and walked around to meet him on the front porch. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble that suggested he'd skipped his morning routine, hands that trembled slightly as he tried to smooth his shirt. Dad, we need to talk. I thought we said everything we needed to say yesterday. Please, just 5 minutes. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I need you to understand what's happening. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the front door and led him into the living room. Michael perched on the edge of Martha's old recliner like he might need to run at any moment. I remained standing, arms crossed, waiting for whatever explanation he thought might justify $3 million in false accusations. The State Insurance Commission called me at 6 this morning, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. They're opening a fraud investigation. My law firm put me on administrative leave pending the outcome. Rebecca's family is demanding answers about newspaper articles they're seeing online. Newspaper articles? Someone leaked the story to the Business Journal. Local attorney accused of insurance fraud in family lawsuit. It's already been picked up by 3 other publications. He ran his hands through his hair. Dad, my career's over. My engagement is over. Everything I've worked for since law school is gone. I should have felt satisfaction hearing those words. Justice served, consequences delivered. The man who'd tried to destroy me finally understanding what destruction felt like. Instead, I just felt tired. What did you expect would happen, Michael? You filed a fraudulent lawsuit against your own father. You stole money from building maintenance accounts to feed a gambling addiction. You planned to extort settlement money to cover your debts. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I thought I could fix it. I thought if I could just buy some time, get back on my feet financially, I could make everything right without anyone getting hurt. Without anyone getting hurt? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Michael, you tried to destroy my business. You attacked my reputation. You made me the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. I know how wrong I was. But Dad, if this criminal investigation moves forward, I'm not just looking at losing my career. I could go to prison, 5 to 10 years for embezzlement and insurance fraud. My life will be over. He was crying now, quietly but unmistakably. The successful attorney facade had crumbled completely, revealing the scared, desperate man underneath. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he was hurt or frightened, the child who believed his father could fix anything. What exactly are you asking me to do? The insurance commission investigator wants to interview you tomorrow. If you could just say that you're not certain about the construction quality, that maybe there were some corners cut due to the family discount, it might give them enough reasonable doubt to drop the criminal investigation. I stared at my son in disbelief. You want me to lie to criminal investigators? You want me to confess to construction defects I didn't commit so you can avoid prison for crimes you did commit? I'm not asking you to confess to anything major. Just create some ambiguity about whether the building problems might be partially related to construction issues. Enough doubt that they can't prove the insurance claims were completely fraudulent. Michael, listen to yourself. You're asking me to destroy my own professional reputation to save you from the consequences of stealing money and filing false insurance claims. You're my father! The words exploded out of him with desperate intensity. Fathers protect their children. That's what family does. They protect each other. Is that what you were doing when you sued me for $3 million? Protecting family? He flinched like I'd slapped him. I was desperate. I made terrible choices. But I never stopped loving you, Dad. I never wanted it to get this far. Then why didn't you come to me when your gambling got out of control? Why didn't you ask for help instead of stealing maintenance money? Why didn't you call me before filing that lawsuit? Because I was ashamed. Because I knew I had disappointed you. Because asking for help felt like admitting I was a failure. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For the first time since this nightmare began, Michael sounded like my son instead of the calculating attorney who'd tried to manipulate me into settlement discussions. So instead of dealing with your shame, you decided to make me the scapegoat for your problems. Yes, and it was the worst mistake I've ever made. Dad, I'm begging you. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm asking anyway. Please don't let me go to prison for this. I walked to the window and looked out at the street where I'd lived for 37 years. Neighbors were going about their normal routines, unaware that the man they'd known for decades was being asked to choose between his integrity and his son's freedom. Michael, even if I agreed to lie to investigators, which I won't, it wouldn't solve your real problems. You still have gambling debts. You still have investors who've lost money because of your mismanagement. You still have a pattern of behavior that suggests you'll make the same mistakes again. I'll get help. Gambling addiction treatment, financial counseling, whatever it takes. Just give me a chance to make this right. You had chances, multiple chances over the past 2 years to get help, to make better choices, to treat your family with honesty and respect. You chose deception and betrayal instead. I turned back to face him, seeing the desperate hope in his eyes slowly dying as he realized I wasn't going to save him from himself. Dad, please, I'm your only child. I'm all you have left of Mom. The mention of Martha felt like a knife between my ribs. Michael knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, exactly how to weaponize my love for him and my grief for his mother. It was manipulative and calculating and probably learned in law school courses about persuasion and negotiation. But it also worked. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, get out of my house now. He stood slowly, his shoulders sagging with defeat. At the door, he turned back one more time. The investigator's interview is tomorrow at 10. Whatever you decide to tell them, I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was too stupid and selfish to show it properly. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by 37 years of memories and facing the hardest decision of my life. In 18 hours, I'd be sitting across from a criminal investigator who would ask me questions about construction quality, building maintenance, and my son's character. I could tell the truth and watch Michael go to prison for crimes he'd actually committed. Or I could lie, compromise my own integrity and enable his destructive behavior to continue. Martha's photo smiled at me from the mantel, offering no guidance about what a good father should do when his child had become someone he no longer recognized. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. Jennifer's name appeared on the caller ID. "David, I heard about the criminal investigation. I wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm not sure okay is the right word. Michael came to see you today, didn't he? I saw his car leaving your neighborhood about an hour ago." "How did you—" "I've been watching his movements since this whole thing started. Call it insurance in case he tries to retaliate against me for providing those documents." Her voice carried a note of genuine concern. What did he want? I told her about Michael's request, his desperate plea for me to provide reasonable doubt about the construction quality. Jennifer listened without interrupting, then sighed heavily. "David, I need to tell you something. Something I didn't mention when I gave you those documents." My stomach clenched. "What?" Michael's gambling debts are worse than what those bank statements show. Much worse. He owes money to people who don't file lawsuits when they want to collect. The kind of people who break bones first and ask questions later. "How much worse?" "Close to $400,000 total. The casino debts are just part of it. He's also involved with underground poker games, private betting pools, sports bookmaking, the kind of gambling that attracts dangerous people." The room started spinning. "Jennifer, why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I hoped the evidence I gave you would be enough to make him stop. I thought if his lawsuit collapsed and his professional reputation was threatened, he'd get help for the addiction and find legal ways to deal with his debts." "But now you don't think that's going to happen?" "Now I think he's desperate enough to do something really stupid. David, if Michael goes to prison, he can't pay those debts, and the people he owes money to don't care about his legal problems. They'll still expect payment, with interest." The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. If Michael went to prison for fraud, he'd be vulnerable to retaliation from the kind of creditors who viewed violence as a legitimate collection strategy. My son could end up dead because I'd chosen justice over family loyalty. "What are you saying, Jennifer?" I'm saying that maybe the criminal investigation isn't the kind of justice we should be hoping for. Maybe there are other ways to make Michael face consequences without putting his life at risk." "Such as?" "Help him disappear. New identity, relocation, a chance to start over somewhere else. It's not justice, but it's survival." I stared out my window at the ordinary suburban street where I'd raised my son, where he'd learned to ride a bicycle and throw a baseball, where I'd taught him that actions had consequences and that good people took responsibility for their mistakes. Now I was being asked to help him escape those consequences by becoming someone else entirely. "Jennifer, what you're suggesting is illegal. Helping someone flee criminal investigation, creating false identity documents, obstruction of justice. I could go to prison myself." "Only if you get caught. And David, I have contacts from my divorce proceedings who specialize in making people vanish. Professional, discreet, expensive, but effective." "Why are you offering to help him, after everything he did to you during the divorce?" A long pause. "Because despite everything, I don't want to see him dead. And because I think you deserve better than having to choose between your integrity and your son's life." The phone felt heavy in my hand as I considered options I'd never imagined having to contemplate. Help my son escape justice and become a fugitive from criminal investigation, or tell the truth to investigators and potentially sign his death warrant with illegal creditors. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow morning. After you talk to that investigator, the choice will be made for you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, touching objects that connected me to happier times. Martha's reading chair, Michael's graduation photos, family vacation souvenirs from trips when we'd actually enjoyed each other's company. By 3 a.m, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad, writing down the pros and cons of each choice like it was a business decision instead of the most important moral choice of my life. Help Michael disappear. Pro, he stays alive. Con, he never faces consequences for his actions, and I become a criminal myself. Tell the truth to investigators. Pro, justice is served and I maintain my integrity. Con, my son might end up dead. There had to be a third option, something I was missing in my exhaustion and emotional turmoil. At 4:30, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Your son has until Friday to make his first payment, $50,000, or we start collecting interest in more creative ways. Tell him Marcus sends his regards." My hands shook as I read the message again. Michael's creditors weren't waiting for criminal investigations to conclude. They were moving forward with their own timeline for collection. I forwarded the message to Jennifer and waited for her response. "This changes everything. You need to make a decision tonight. By tomorrow morning it might be too late." I looked at Martha's photo on the kitchen counter, her smile frozen in time from a day when our biggest worry was whether Michael would remember to call home from college. "What would you do, sweetheart?" I whispered to the empty kitchen. "How do you choose between justice and family? How do you save your child without destroying yourself?" The photo offered no answers, just the eternal silence of loss and the weight of impossible choices. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over the suburban street where I'd tried to be a good father and a good man. In 5 hours, I'd be sitting across from a criminal investigator who would ask me simple questions that had devastatingly complex answers. The truth would set someone free, but I was no longer certain who that someone should be. Standing in my kitchen as the first rays of sunlight painted the walls gold, I realized that some decisions change you forever, regardless of which path you choose. The investigator would arrive in 3 hours, and I still didn't know what I would tell him. But I knew this much. Michael had taught me something I never wanted to learn. That blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. That the children we raise in love can become strangers who see us as obstacles to overcome rather than family to protect. That sometimes the most painful lesson a father can learn is when to stop being a father and start being a man with principles. I picked up my phone and deleted Jennifer's number. I deleted the threatening text from Michael's creditors. I walked to the bathroom mirror and looked at the 64-year-old man staring back at me, weathered by 4 decades of honest work and 3 years of grief, but not broken by his son's betrayal. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same integrity that had built Harrison Construction from nothing. The same values Martha and I had tried to instill in the boy who'd grown into a man I barely recognized. The same commitment to truth that had guided every decision in my adult life. Some bridges burn themselves. Some relationships end not with dramatic confrontations, but with the quiet realization that love alone isn't enough to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. At 9:50 that morning, I straightened my tie, picked up the folder containing 40 years of impeccable work records, and drove downtown to meet with a criminal investigator who would ask me to tell the truth about my son. For the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what I was going to say.